Okay, so I owe you a life update because I accidentally lived about 7 plot lines in the last 2 months. There was a passport situation that had me low-key committing administrative crimes. Then there was Bali, where I hosted my first ever group trip, learned to scuba dive, swam with manta rays, and suddenly became the kind of person who knew what coral restoration is. Then I hitchhiked through Thailand with a bunch of friends, trespassed multiple times by sleeping in abandoned hostels, abandoned resorts. I went wild camping, didn't touch my phone for days, and had the most insane moment of my life. Very Disney-esque, but I'll tell you all about that. And then when I got back, I turned my phone on and I got news that turned my whole life upside down. So yeah, there's a lot to cover. Let's catch up. Hello, and welcome back to the Lost and Found podcast, the space where we're figuring things out in real time together. First of all, I'm recording this from my childhood home in South Africa, believe it or not. I did not think I would be back again so soon. If you've been keeping up with my comings and goings, you would know that I visited home for about 2 weeks last November because I needed to get a new passport. My passport was actually fully stamped, which is crazy. And if you're curious to know what happens when you try to travel with a fully stamped passport, let me tell you. I'm quite laissez-faire about stuff like this, and I always seem to believe that everything will just work out. So, in April of last year, I flew to India with very little space in my passport left. And I knew, but I just kind of thought that people wouldn't care. So, anyway, I spent 3 months in India, and when I try to fly to Vietnam from there, they call me to the side and tell me that Vietnam won't let me in because my passport is full. Now, they say this to me in Vietnam, so not in India. I've already landed and I'm at immigration. And I know they can't turn me back now, so even while they're saying this, I'm not too stressed. Basically, I kind of just shrug and I say to this guy, I'm so sorry, I had no idea. They didn't say anything before I boarded my flight and now I'm here. Isn't there just the tiniest bit of space left? He kind of smirks and he looks through my passport and he finds a spot. I don't know where, but anyway, I'm in. Fast forward through 3 months in Vietnam. Of course, again, I completely forget about this problem. But now I have to do a visa run. So the plan was for me to fly to Bangkok for a weekend, renew my Vietnam visa, and come back for another month or so because I just wasn't ready to leave Vietnam yet. And as the Bangkok weekend approaches, I realize, damn, my passport. But again, I think surely everything will be fine. I page through my passport and I see maybe like a tiny space for a tiny stamp. And I know that the rules are technically you need to have a full page open to even be able to fly anywhere, but whatever, there's a tiny space. And at that point, there was no way that I was flying home to get a new passport. So it just had to work. As I'm checking in for my flight to Bangkok, I see the stewardess kind of thumbing through my passport looking for space. And she frowns and she thumbs through again. And then she excuses herself to call her manager. But still, I have faith. So then the manager comes and he tells me that I won't be let on the flight, my non-refundable flight. Now at this point, my heart sank. And only then did I realize that I actually have a problem. At the time, I was traveling with, gasp, a man, and I had resigned to my fate that I wouldn't go with him to Bangkok, and we literally said goodbye to each other. Then I'm like, no, I'm going to try one more time. So I go up to her, I tell the airline people that I'm flying to Bangkok to collect my new passport that is waiting for me, fresh with a ton of pages open, which of course is absolute bullshit. They're kind of skeptical, but they tell me that they'll call the Thai immigration on the other side. So I wait, and after about an hour of waiting, they come up to announce that I can actually get on the plane, but only if it's true that I'm collecting my new passport. So yes, of course, I say, and I happily get on the plane. Then we spend the most amazing few days in Bangkok. There's this little Italian place on Maharat Road, which is right next to the Chao Phraya River. It's so lovely. We had dinner there, we had a lot of wine, we spent hours just sitting and chatting in Sarandrom Park, close to the Royal Palace. I personally love Bangkok. It is definitely crazy and chaotic, and it's hot, and people are all pressed up against each other. And yeah, it's maybe not as nice as Kuala Lumpur or Ho Chi Minh City, but Bangkok definitely has its own vibe, its own splendor and history, and appeal. That's the word I'm looking for. It definitely has its own appeal. And I love big cities in general because it just feels like there's so much life, there's so much to do. There's all these endless little cafes and bars and cute streets and art and culture to explore. 2 years ago, I actually spent a month in Bangkok. And even though I don't think I could live there for more than like 6 months, I still think it's a really special place. And the people are so cool. The local people who live in Bangkok, they definitely have their own vibe, almost like New Yorkers, but just more interesting, I would say. Like the Thai people from smaller towns are so sweet, and you get the sense that they are very open and soft hearted and giving. But the people from Bangkok are like, don't fuck with me, riding on motorcycles with tattoos and Hello Kitty sunglasses, that type of thing. I mean, just go and experience it for yourself. It's really hard to explain. Anyway, I digress. So, the last night before we need to fly back to Vietnam, we tackle the question of my passport. I realize that there's probably not a chance, really, that I'm going to get back into Vietnam, which is, of course, something I probably should have thought of before getting on the flight to Bangkok in the first place, but alas, that is not something that crossed my mind. And of course, all my stuff is back in the apartment that I was renting at the time in Hoi An, and I just packed for this little weekend away. I didn't even have my laptop with me. So when Monday rolls around, I won't even be able to log on for work. The worst case scenario plan thing that we're cooking up is that I'll stay in Bangkok and my friend, romantic liaison, shall I say, he'll go back to Vietnam because obviously he is responsible and doesn't have a passport problem. He will then pack all my bags for me, send them to Bangkok, and once I get them, I'll have to fly home to South Africa to get a new passport. Because the only place they allow you to fly to with a full passport is home, now I've learned. I hated this plan, of course, because the two of us already had plans to do a road trip down the whole south of Vietnam on his motorcycle. So we start looking into maybe some not so legal alternatives. I knew that if I could just get one of these stupid full-page visas out of my passport, then all of my problems would be solved. But of course, they're glued to the page, so it would be a very delicate endeavor to try and separate it. Especially because tampering with your passport is illegal, and if they notice it at immigration or at the airport, you will be detained and you could go to prison. But there's no harm in trying, right? So here we are on a Reddit deep dive, trying to find out how to safely get a visa page out of my passport. We scroll past all the stories of people saying it won't work, don't even try, I got detained, blah blah blah. Finally, we found out if you heat the page on the one side, it should be easier to loosen the sticker of the visa. Okay, so imagine this. We're sitting here. I have a hairdryer in my hand and I'm heating up one of my passport pages while he's trying to loosen the edge of some Egyptian visa I got a few years ago. And after about an hour, we realize two things. One, it's not working, obviously. And two, if we go any further with this, the damage will start to get really obvious, and then I'll be in some real trouble if someone notices we were trying to tamper with the passport. So I do the only thing that I can do at this point. I cross my heart and I hope to fly. The next day we get to the airport and I am stressed. But I have a plan. I booked a fake ticket to South Africa for the next day from Da Nang in Vietnam to Johannesburg. And when the whole song and dance happens again, when they call the manager comes, he says I can't get on the flight. So I tell them, listen, all my stuff is in Vietnam. I show them my fake flight ticket and tell them that I'm just going back into Vietnam to get my stuff, and then I'm immediately leaving for South Africa to get a new passport. I promise. They call the Vietnamese authorities, and what do you know? They actually give me a special paper explaining my circumstances, and they let me on the plane. Damn, just my luck. And then I get my little fairy tale road trip for another month, traveling down the south of Vietnam by motorbike with this beautiful man, and alas, I fly home at my own leisure when we reach Ho Chi Minh City. Now, trust me, I would have stayed in Vietnam and not cared too much about my passport, but I had my Bali group trip coming up in December, and I knew there was no way I could replicate the same luck in a new country, especially not if I had to be there to host this group trip. So, I go home, I get my new passport, which was actually quite easy. So shout out to the South African government. It was way easier than I thought it would be. I think I literally waited like 10 days after my initial appointment to get the passport. Amazing. Then December rolls around, and I'm in Bali for my first ever group trip that I'm hosting. It was incredible. It genuinely exceeded all of my wildest dreams. So, firstly, a big thank you to World Packers. I hosted the trip in collaboration with them, and it was so easy. They did everything. All I did was show up. And then thank you to Sanctum Dive Center in Nusa Penida and everyone who works there. You guys made us feel like such a family. You looked after us so well. You taught us to dive from scratch. I mean, in just a couple of days, we were pros. We were doing eco-conservation work, helping with coral restoration, identifying fish, all while having mastered this crazy new skill in just a couple of days. So that's amazing. I'm so proud of myself and I'm so proud of my group that we did this. It's really cool. Before getting into all of that, I want to talk about Bali itself and then about the trip and the diving in particular. So, Bali. There's a lot of opinions about Bali going around. Older people, people who travel mostly for vacation, influencers, millennial digital nomads, they love Bali. It's all the rage for them. But people who travel full time, also backpackers, Gen Z, people who are maybe looking for a bit more of a local and authentic experience, they say that Bali is just one big tourist trap. So, what do I think? Well, firstly, you have to realize that Bali itself is big, and there's a lot of different towns on the island, and each town has a different vibe. So, Canggu and Seminyak, that's where you won't really find me. When people say Bali is overrated and it's only for influencers and podcast bros, they're really talking about these two places. It's all parties and overpriced gyms and smoothie bowls and lemon lulu and but Lululemon? Is it? Yeah, Lululemon. And if that's your vibe, that's cool. Have at it. But I personally really loved Ubud. So Ubud has kind of this reputation of being a hippie paradise. But to be honest, I didn't see a lot of real hippies or bohemian culture there. You can tell that it was there once, and there's still a lot of meditation retreats and yoga and ecstatic dance going on, so that's great. But it's a bit more touristy now. Not in a bad way, though. It's not chaotic or too much. What I really like about Ubud is that there were still so many local places, like cute, beautiful cafes, and yes, obviously also hotels and bars for tourists, but also tiny houses and these incredible rice fields. So Ubud for me just feels slower and greener, and I would say more introspective. You walk into a cafe and everyone's journaling. I could definitely see myself living there for a few months, and stuff was way more affordable than I thought it would be. But if you're looking for a place that is more of what Ubud was like in its prime, then I would suggest you to go to Pai in Thailand. That's truly a bohemian haven. It's my favorite place that I've ever been. The energy, the people, everything. But still, Ubud is not overrated. I mean, it's the place where the Bali portion of Eat, Pray, Love was filmed, just to give you an idea. But also, when you're in Ubud, you need to explore. Don't just walk the main street and the markets. The most magical parts are when you walk through the little rice field walkways that leads you to all these beautiful places. And then you find the really nice local cafes and the little art galleries and wooden huts. I also loved Uluwatu. Not as much as Ubud, but it was really nice. It feels raw and expansive. There's a lot of cliffs and surfing and sunsets, and it also feels a bit quieter than Canggu and Seminyak. Then you have Ahmed and Sidamen. They're quite spacious, soft. It feels a bit more like a village. Sanur is calm. It has a walkable beachfront. The crowd is a bit older, so more families, that type of vibe. But if you're looking for real old Bali, go to Sidamen. It is quite rural. There's a lot of village life, rice terraces. It's very peaceful, that kind of thing. I'm not even going to say anything about Kuta. Just trust me, don't go. So, back to the question, is Bali overrated? No, definitely not. It depends on where you go and also what you're looking for. Plus, if there's one thing I've learned traveling for so long, it's that you need to be open for what a space offers you, and you need to let a place be what it is, and then meet it without expectations. If you accept that Bali has become very touristy and that a lot of areas cater mainly towards tourists, but that it's still amazingly beautiful, then you will love it. I mean, you cannot go to a place and hate all the tourists if you're a tourist too, right? So just be open and take it for what it is, and I think you'll really love it. Anyway, now I'm done preaching. Let's talk about the group trip. So, that wasn't actually on Bali Island itself. It was on a tiny island right next to it that is seen as part of Bali, but also kind of its own thing, and it's called Nusa Penida. Nusa Penida is mainly known for diving and for that famous Instagram spot above the sloping T-Rex shaped beach. It's called Kalinking Beach. That was complete chaos. I have a picture on my Instagram of this beach. It's iconic, it's beautiful, but behind the phone, behind the camera, it's just absolute chaos. People shouting at each other for them to have a spot to take a photo at this beach. Yeah, crazy. But beyond that, the island is really untamed and it offers a very local and I think authentically Indonesian experience. The roads are rough, the distances are deceptive, and the diving sites are some of the best in the world. We stayed in this lovely little hotel run by a local family, just a short walk from the diving center where we got our classes. And when we all met the first day, I immediately knew we were going to get along really well. The vibes immediately clicked. We were three girls from South Africa, so me, Danielle, and Mika, lovely Lily from Oregon, and Thais from Brazil. And Thais actually works for Worldpackers. She was just supposed to be there on the first day to welcome us, but she liked our group so much that she decided to do the whole trip with us, which I'm so grateful for because I couldn't have done it without her. We were an amazing group. On the very first night, we went skinny dipping in the ocean, and that really bonded us super quickly. We did the same on the last night just to say goodbye. And then we're like all hugging each other and we're naked and we're looking out over Bali's lights and we're just crying because we had to say goodbye. After we all got tattoos, it was really special. In between the daily dives, we went to a crazy party at a jungle hostel. We spent so many nights at Sanctum just sitting around in a circle singing songs while some of the diving instructors played the guitar and passed around Reiki, which is a lethal local alcohol, so watch out. We watched sunsets on the beach. We danced barefoot in the rain. We swam at night in the ocean while it was raining so many times. We had heartfelt conversations into the early morning hours, and then we had to get up super early for our dives. So the whole thing felt like such a heart-healing, beautiful experience. Now, the diving itself was a real bucket list item for me. The first day we just did it in the pool to get used to the sensation of breathing underwater. And at first it was kind of strange. I'm really glad we started in the pool because if we had to go deeper into the ocean on that first day, I think I would have panicked. But after the first pool session, you kind of get comfortable really quickly, especially to that feeling of breathing underwater, which for me was, I think, the most difficult thing to get used to. But on day 2, it was already fine, so that's great. On our first ocean dive, which was day 2, we already swam with manta rays. And that for me was a core memory. They are these gentle giants, and you really feel their intelligence when you're in the water with them. It's like they don't rush, they glide, like they're flying through the water. They move as if they know something that we don't. If I had to compare their vibe to something, I would say that they're like these ancient librarians of the ocean. I had a pretty powerful encounter with one. So we were diving, and one of them swam right up to me, very slowly, and we literally locked eyes. It felt like this animal was staring into my soul. It gave me goosebumps underwater. And this manta ray just kept swimming, so I went on my back, and it passed right over me, belly to belly, so close that I could see the patterns on its underside. And in that moment, I felt so small. I felt humbled in the best possible way. I felt like I was being invited into a world that wasn't really meant for humans. And I was realizing bit by bit what the ocean really has to offer. And the diving itself, not even talking about the beautiful marine life, the diving itself was a deeply healing practice for me. So when you're down below in the water, you have to focus on your breath. You breathe deeply through your mouth the whole time, and everything else around you is quiet. All you hear is your breath. And because of that, it feels really meditative. I understand now why people say that diving is a stress reliever. And what's interesting, when we talked about the dives afterwards, the girls would say what they were thinking about while they were down there. Also, even later, when I was diving in Koh Tao in Thailand with some other friends, the same conversations came up about how some people can't quite get out of their minds when they're down there. But for me, it was like everything just went blank. I didn't think about anything. I was just so fully present and in the moment and felt like I was completely empty of myself, which was a truly incredible experience. And over the next few dives, we swam with sea turtles, actual sea turtles. Like they were just minding their own business, chewing on coral, floating past us like some underwater monks. And there were octopuses too, which felt like spotting aliens. They are so clever and curious, and they change color right in front of your eyes. And it's like they're watching you, watching them. Crazy. And there were schools of fish moving like one single organism. These tiny neon things and creatures hiding in crevices, whole cities living beneath the surface. And then there's the coral. So before the trip, I thought coral was just pretty rocks or something you snorkel over or something you photograph. I didn't really understand that coral is actually a living marine animal. It's a living organism. And it's also the foundation of entire ecosystems. So it turns out coral reefs support about a quarter of all marine life. They function as nurseries, as homes, protection. And without them, everything starts to unravel. I have some beautiful GoPro footage of all of this. If you're curious to see what it looks like, I'll leave a link in the episode description to the video that I put together about all our dives. But what really made the whole conservation thing hit home for me was seeing both sides of the coin. So on one dive, we'd be floating over the most vibrant reef, colors you don't even know how to describe, purples and oranges and electric blues that you've never seen before. And then, just a few meters away, you would see dead coral, gray and brittle and silent. And when we dove there, it felt like swimming through a graveyard. It was really sad. And then there was the plastic. Even though most of the diving sites in Nusa Penida are perfect and clean, thanks to all the work done by the locals who live there and the conservation projects like the one that we took part in, but there are still some times when the tide hits a certain way and trash floats in from different parts, maybe the mainland or whatever. And at one point, I remember we were on a dive and I looked up and I saw a plastic bag drifting past in the water column, just there, suspended and completely out of place, floating above this beautiful sea life village that we were looking at. And that image of the vibrant marine life with the plastic bag drifting by, that image really stayed with me. Because suddenly it wasn't abstract anymore. It wasn't statistics or documentaries or infographics. It was actually right there, in the same water as the turtles and the manta rays and the coral that we were trying to protect. And it did something to my heart. It made it impossible to look away. Doing the conservation work, helping restore coral, learning how fragile these systems are, made me realize how interconnected everything is. How the smallest choices that we make ripple outwards. And it also made me realize how careless I've been and how much responsibility we as a human race actually carry, whether we want it or not. And what made it hit home even more was the time I spent wild camping on a deserted island in Thailand just a few weeks after the Bali group trip. I'll tell you more about that in a second, but while we're on the topic of plastic and pollution, I think this is important to say. Because on this other island in Thailand, where almost no one lives, one entire side of the beach was completely covered in plastic. And I don't mean a few bottles here and there, I mean layers, years of it, bottle caps, broken flip-flops, toothbrushes, lighters, fishing rope, all sun-bleached and half buried in the sand. And the crazy thing is, it wasn't coming from the island itself. This was trash that had traveled, trash that had floated in on currents over years and years, washing up again and again with no one there to pick it up. And that was the moment that it really landed for me. Because you want to believe that if you go far enough, right? If you leave cities or if you leave crowds and consumption behind, that you'll find places that are still untouched, that are pure and safe. But I learned with horror that most remote islands in the world now look like this. There's no away anymore, no mythical place where our waste disappears to. Even the edges of the map are keeping the score. I want to say that again. Even the edges of the map are keeping the score. You have to imagine, I was standing there, barefoot in the sand, surrounded by palm trees and the most beautiful turquoise water, looking at piles of plastic where a beach should have been. And for me, right then, things changed. It stopped being someone else's problem, and it stopped being theoretical, and it became personal. And I think that's the uncomfortable truth. You don't really understand the impact until you see it with your own eyes. You might think that whatever you could do is too small to really make a difference, but that's not true. Change doesn't arrive all at once. It accumulates. It's made through small and sometimes boring, consistent choices. And change comes through noticing and caring. By doing the slightly better thing, even when no one is clapping for you, even though it's just one plastic bottle at a time that you refuse. Because that's exactly how the destruction happened. One plastic bottle at a time. And it's not just about making the change for change's sake. It's about integrity. You cannot say you care about something, about the planet, about wildlife, about the future, and then live in a way that constantly contradicts that. At some point, your values have to show up in your behavior, even in the inconvenient, unglamorous moments. And trust me, I'm not saying this from a place of moral superiority. I'm saying it as someone who is very much still learning and still unlearning and still catching myself. But I do think that caring is a practice and it is something you train. And travel for me has been one of the most powerful teachers in that, because once you've seen it and once it's real, you cannot pretend that it isn't. So I want to share a few quick, small, practical things that I've started doing since the trip to help be a part of the change. Nothing dramatic, nothing that requires a personality transplant. Just changes that felt obvious once I'd seen what I'd seen. So the first one, when you know you're going into the ocean, only use reef-safe sunscreen, because a lot of chemical sunscreens actually damage coral DNA and contribute to coral bleaching. And once reefs are damaged, entire ecosystems start to deteriorate. So it's such an easy swap, but it makes a real difference. Secondly, I try to carry a reusable water bottle now. I know we've all heard the single-use plastic conversation 1,000 times, but there's something about seeing plastic literally floating past you while you're underwater that rewires your brain. You realize how quickly just one bottle adds up. I also want to encourage you just to say no to plastic straws from now on. Partly, yes, because of environmental damage, but also because you look ridiculous using it. Have you ever seen a grown man sip some sugary cocktail out of a straw? Oh, it's one of my biggest icks. Anyway, another big one. Never step on coral. Coral isn't a plant, it's a marine animal. That means it's alive and it's incredibly fragile. One careless step can destroy something that took decades to grow. And damaged coral doesn't just look bad, it leads to ecosystem collapse. That's why it matters. I'm also really conscious about what I eat when I travel. So I'm already pescatarian. I was vegan for a long time, but I realized that it wasn't really sustainable for me, especially while traveling full time in places like Asia where eggs are just in everything. I was vegetarian for a while too, but now I do sometimes eat fish. And I want to be honest about that because I think that sustainability has to be sustainable. For me, veganism started to feel kind of rigid and exhausting on the road. It made food stressful, and eventually it just led me to be less consistent and not more. So I chose something that is more doable for me. But that doesn't take away from the fact that eating less meat is one of the most powerful and impactful things that you can do for the planet. The meat industry is a massive contributor to deforestation, water use, emissions, all of that. So from an environmental perspective, a vegetarian or mostly plant-based diet makes a real difference. And that's just a fact. So for me, pescatarianism is a bit of a middle ground that I can maintain. It's something that I can stick to without burning out. A diet you can live with for years is more powerful than a perfect one that you abandon after 6 months. Okay? But also, the good news is you don't have to go all in for it to count. You don't have to label yourself anything. Even just committing to 1 or 2 vegetarian nights a week makes a difference. There's fewer resources used, fewer emissions, less pressure on ecosystems. Small shifts repeated over time, that's what matters. And it's also healthier for you. But even though I'm pescatarian, there's one line that I will never cross, and that is eating endangered animals for the sake of a fine dining experience. I mean, I've seen manta rays and sea turtle eggs and shark fins on restaurant menus, and the heartbreaking part is that these species reproduce so slowly that one meal can erase decades of recovery. That is not culture, that's extinction that people parade around as luxury, and it's really heartbreaking. Once you've swum with these animals, and once you've looked them in the eye underwater in their habitat, it stops being a menu item and it becomes a relationship. Some things just aren't ours to consume. Okay, last one, then I stop preaching. And this one might surprise you, but I'm also limiting mindless AI use. Tools like ChatGPT rely on massive, energy-hungry data centers that need constant cooling. So this uses huge amounts of electricity and water. Every prompt runs on real energy, and scaled globally, that contributes to climate change, ocean warming, reef collapse. So for me, it's about using these tools intentionally and not reflexively. And also, it's about keeping your critical thinking skills and your ability to stay creative and think for yourself. I did a whole other episode recently on thinking for yourself in an age of AI and algorithms, so if you're interested, go give that a listen too. And now I know the question is, why even bother? What difference does any of this really make? Why is the ocean so important? The ocean produces over half of the oxygen we breathe. It absorbs around a quarter of our carbon emissions. It feeds billions of people. It regulates the climate. And there is no human system that can function without it. So yeah, this isn't about being perfect. It's about being conscious. And it's about realizing that the way we live, even in small ways, touches places that we never see, and choosing to act accordingly. Again, it's about integrity and showing you care through your own actions, even just in small ways. Okay, preachy moment over. Thanks for listening to that, and I really hope it landed. But I do want to say, hosting that group trip to Bali and watching what happens when people slow down together and learn new skills together and have real conversations and step out of their usual routines, it made me realize how hungry we all are for this kind of travel. You know, the kind that actually changes you and changes something in the world and makes you feel significant in a way. So, big news, drumroll. I'm hosting another group trip this year, and it feels very aligned with everything that I've been talking about in this episode. From the 10th to the 18th of June 2026, I'm hosting a mountain wellness retreat in rural Thailand because I love Thailand so much. And it's far from the noise, and it's designed around simple living, sustainability, and real rest. This isn't a do more, see more kind of trip. It's really something where we're going to slow down. We'll be staying at a quiet mountain farm stay, each in their own private wooden cabin, and we'll be surrounded by nature. Think waking up to birds in the morning, open air spaces, proper quiet. And all our meals will be home cooked, plant-based, farm to table, and you'll actually learn how to make some of them yourself. We will be doing things like cooking together, we'll make natural self-care products for ourselves, we'll learn practical sustainable living skills that you can take home with you, which I think is so important and really links with everything that we just talked about. I will also be hosting guided journaling sessions so that we can get deeper into what we feel is the purpose of our lives, the purpose of life in general, and where you want to go, where you're at in your life right now. We'll be doing daily yoga, mindfulness, slow walks through the mountains, sharing circles, and a lot of honest, grounding conversations. But more than anything, the intention I have for this trip is just to create space, to help us reconnect with our bodies, each other, and nature, and remember what actually matters. I'll leave a link to the pre-launch group chat in the description box. You'll get everything there. Okay, now back to the life update. So after the group trip ended, I met up with some friends in the south of Thailand and we hitchhiked around the islands down there. I really loved Koh Tao. Koh Tao was my favorite. It's actually quite remote. It's rather far from the mainland, but you do have a little town there and you have comfort, and it's not like you're just in the jungle, but you can definitely find that feeling of remoteness and jungleness on the island if you want it. I spent Christmas with these friends. We were wild camping on Koh Tao, where we were hopping around between jungle sites or sleeping on the beach. We even slept in an abandoned resort for a few nights, and then in an abandoned hostel, all for the plot, of course. And somewhere in between all of this craziness, the plan hit us that we wanted to go camp on a deserted island. Like, full on Leonardo DiCaprio in the beach. We wanted to find an island where no tourists had ever set foot on. We talked to some locals and found out, sadly, that there really isn't an island like that in the modern day anymore. There's almost no completely deserted islands left in the world. But we were not left dejected. So we took the best we could find, and we picked a quite unknown island, which was called Koh Taying. It's about a 30-minute boat drive from Koh Samui. And there's only one homestay on the island and one restaurant run by local fishermen, but all of that was like on one side. We picked the furthest tip of the island on the eastern side, far away from everything, and there was literally nothing around us. We set up camp there, literally a couple of meters from the beach. Now, obviously, if you're thinking of doing this yourself, you need to know that we did go buy provisions and food and stuff before on Koh Samui. And we also had to pay a local sea captain to take us there on his boat and tell him to collect us 4 days later. And kind of, fingers crossed he comes. We were sleeping in hammocks, we made fire, we hunted for coconuts. It was an incredible few days. Genuinely some of my best memories. I didn't have any signal. I didn't turn my phone on. I did do a video on the trip, and I'll link that down below in the description box, but that was mostly filmed with everyone else's phones. I really wanted to not have my technology around me, and it felt really good to be away from everything and not have anywhere to be, no text messages to answer, and no shower either. I mean, we're just swimming in the ocean, pooping in the forest, that kind of thing. I was living in my bikini, and every night we were just chatting around the fire. It felt incredible to have time just stretch out again. And I realized without a phone, you're really forced back into your body. We woke up when the sun rose because it was hot, and we fell asleep when it was dark because there was not much else to do. And you get bored, and then instead of scrolling, you start talking, or you're staring into the fire, or swimming, or thinking. Proper thinking, And I think that's something that we're really starved of. We live so much of our lives mediated through screens. Even our rest has to be productive or optimized or documented. But out there, none of that mattered. For 4 days, I was just alive. Salty, sunburned, living in my bikini, eating simple food, chatting around the fire, watching the tide come in and out. I definitely don't think you need to disappear to a deserted island to experience that, but I do think we underestimate how powerful it is to regularly step away from our devices, even briefly, even if it's just for a day or a few hours. But the idea is to give your nervous system a break from being constantly on and available to people, Because when the noise falls away, there's something else that comes forward. And for me, that was clarity, gratitude, joy, reconnecting with myself, reconnecting with friends, the earth, the stuff that really matters. And then on the last day, I had the most insane experience of my whole life. That evening, after the sun had set and the island went quiet, we ran into the ocean. We didn't plan it, there was no countdown, just instinct, these 5 bodies, laughing, screaming, falling into the warm water. And as we were running into the water, something incredible happened. Right in front of us, right around us, the sea lit up. Each movement that we did turned the water neon blue. My hands, my legs, my hair. Wherever we touched or moved, the darkness literally exploded into light. It was crazy. And of course, it was bioluminescent plankton, but there was so much of it, more than I knew existed in the world. We screamed, we laughed, we splashed each other like children. We genuinely couldn't believe what we were seeing. It felt unreal. Like the universe was giving us a little moment and saying, look at all the magic I have. I've never felt all like that before. I wish we had captured it on camera, but also I'm glad we didn't. We were too inside the moment, too present, and I don't think the moment belonged to the internet. It just belonged to us and to the water and to that night. It was so beautiful. Something gathered there, I think, something holy, and we were these 5 glowing bodies in the dark, just covered in blue stars, as if we were bathing in stardust. As we were splashing each other with water, it was like blue stars stuck to our bodies. I felt immortal. It was pure childlike elation. Crazy, crazy moment. But then, the next day, we returned to civilization and I turned my phone back on. And then everything changed. So many missed calls flooded my phone. So many messages of condolences. Because I found out that while we were away, my phone wasn't on, my grandmother had died. My grandmother had died. I still don't quite know how to say that sentence out loud. I don't know how someone can be here one moment and then just not, you know? How the world can keep spinning when someone so central to my life isn't here anymore. But it didn't take me long to realize that her death had happened around the exact same time that the water lit up around us. That's crazy. She was one of the most important people in my life, truly. And I don't want to exaggerate this when I say it, but the only thing I can compare to the blue of her eyes is the color of that glowing ocean on the night that she died. And I realized she never did like leaving without saying goodbye. Yeah, so now I'm home. I'm actually recording this from my childhood bedroom because her funeral was yesterday. And everything still feels quite unreal, like I'm moving through a foggy version of my own life because I just don't understand how is she gone? How does the world look exactly the same when someone so irreplaceable isn't here anymore? I'm literally looking out my window right now over to her house where she and my granddad lived, right across the garden, and I'm thinking that she's gonna peek through the curtain at any point and call me and say, Kariki, come have a cup of coffee with me. Any moment now, she's gonna call me. Yeah, it's been a really hard. It's been a really hard few weeks. I don't have answers. I'm not going to wrap this up with meaning or lessons or silver linings, but I do know this. You know, being out there on that island, disconnected from technology, and feeling fully alive in my body, it reminded me of something I think we forget easily. How thin the veil is between beauty and loss, between magic and grief, and between being here and not being here. And maybe that's why all of this matters. The travel, the conservation, the presence, the choosing to pay attention, all of these things. It matters because life doesn't wait for us to be ready. And these moments that change us or save us, they rarely announce themselves. So if this episode is about anything, I think it's this. It's, I'm trying to say, pay attention and care. Be here while you still can, because you never know when you won't be. I had to speak at her funeral yesterday, and I said at one point that this loss for me made me realize that life is just one big party, and your parents dropped you off, and you don't know when they're going to collect you again, so you might as well dance while you're here. And I hope you're dancing enough. I hope my grandma danced enough. I love you, Grandma. Danke, Liefja, Oma. Oh, there's so much I want to tell you guys about her, but this episode is already so long, and she deserves an episode all for herself. Anyway, so thank you for being here. Thank you for caring enough to listen and catch up. You are now fully caught up with my life and everything that happened these 2 past crazy months. And you're probably wondering where I'm heading next. Well, that is a surprise, but I can tell you one thing for certain. I'm not planning to be in South Africa for long. So anyway, I hope you are well. I hope you are experiencing love and joy and light. Until next time, don't forget to get a little lost this week. That's where the magic finds you.